hang in and wait. We are live! Yay! Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's live podcast episode. We are currently streaming this episode across pretty much most of our channels right now. So if you're listening on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, good afternoon. Happy, is it Wednesday today? Wednesday. I'm literally losing track of my days. So good afternoon to all of you. I hope all of you are well and sitting down with a nice cup of tea, ready to have a deep dive conversation today about burnout. Now, I actually think that this topic hasn't come at a better time, because I know that for many of you, you will be feeling particularly overwhelmed this week with some of the announcements that have happened. And we've been talking in our communities this week about how we can support each other. So I just think it's absolute perfect timing to invite a wonderful guest onto the podcast today, Dr. Joanna Martin. I'm going to introduce you to her in a second. And Dr. Joanna Martin, her community and her programs have literally been an absolute life changer for me over the last 18 months to 2 years. And I'm really delighted to introduce her to you. So welcome, Joanna, to the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to getting to know your community.
Thank you so much. So for anyone who hasn't come across your work, Joanna, tell us a little bit about One of Many and the community that you have built, and what that stands for.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess it has its roots in when I was a new mum. I was, I'd been an entrepreneur for quite a long time. I'd been a coach for some time. Since back 2003, I started coaching after being a medical doctor via drama school, a host of other weird and odd things. But that's how long I'd been doing coaching for. But when my first child came along, James, which is about 7 years ago now, I remember I was sitting in a darkened room, breastfeeding him, full of loads of great ideas, with no time, of course, to do anything with them, because when you're a new mum, you don't have time to do anything. But one of the things that struck me at that time, with this precious little bundle of perfection in my arms, was that the world he was stepping into was very much less than perfect. Do you know? There was a lot of financial inequity. There was massive issues around climate change, racial injustice, just everything through the lens of this perfect, unblemished little being. It just showed up to me the imperfections and the challenges of our world in a much greater way. And I think a lot of mothers feel that transition when they become not exclusively mothers, of course, but there is that moment where you recognize that this is a generational thing. We're leaving a legacy here. And it was at that point that I thought, this has got to change. This is something that's absolutely got to change. And I realized that there's a quote that gets bandied around a lot in women's empowerment spaces from the Dalai Lama that says, "The Western woman will change the world." He said it at the Vancouver Peace Summit in 2009. And on the one hand, I kind of get it, absolutely get it, right? And I don't necessarily think he's getting at necessarily Western women, but women with resources. And there's just as many of those in the UK and the US and the West as there are in the Middle East and East Asia and Africa. There's resources everywhere you turn. Women with resources, I think, really can make a dramatic difference. And I think it's because we have this mix of compassion and the resourcefulness to be able to bring these two together and impact. And for me, as I was sitting there kind of in this weird meditative breastfeeding spaced out space with James, it dawned on me for the first time that perhaps who those women are is not who I had thought they would be. Perhaps it's not just the Hillary Clintons, the Theresa Mays, the Jacinda Arderns of the world. Perhaps it's actually us, you and I, the women in our communities, my neighbor, my sisters, my mother, my grandmother when she was alive. It's we women at a grassroots level, like the impact that we can have in our spaces, whether that space is just our family, whether that space is our school that our kids go to, or that space is our community, our local community, or some kind of online community, or our organization, or a nation, or a global movement. It doesn't matter what the size of the space is. I truly believe that if we want to transform the world, it is grassroots women leaders that are required required to energize those shifts. And so, but as I looked at most of the women I knew, myself included at that time, we were tearing around like headless chickens. Do you know? There's always something to juggle, you know. There's always someone's still got to pay the car insurance, organize the Christmas presents, you know, book the holiday, you know, all just life admin plus you know, our work, whatever our work may be. And there's usually not much time left over to think about actually impacting the world in a positive way. So I recognized that there was a need for both tools to handle the juggle and a community where it's okay to be juggling, failing, hoping, dreaming about change, activating on change, failing at it, winning at it, and just that really loving, safe space that says, do you know what? I can want to change the world and be a single mum who's currently full-time parenting. I can want to change the world and be way too busy in my job to do anything about it right now. I can want to change the world and be able to activate on it once as I get myself sorted. We're getting to this point where it has to be first this, then that. I wanted to make a space and a stand that we could imperfectly, in parallel, live an impactful life without it meaning more on our plate and burning out, because we haven't got time to wait, really.
Yeah, and what I love about what you said there, Joanna, is it's almost like that process of it being okay to go through those ebbs and flows of life, right? Because and right now, I know for many of us, we are in that state of all of a sudden we might have children at home, or we might be furloughed from work, or lots of things are going on in our lives. And I love the kind of whole collective power of women as a community, whether it's in your, as you said, in your local communities or in your families, coming together to support each other. So in terms of the impact then, Joanna, that you want to create for these grassroots leaders, what kind of impact, when you've helped somebody to build their vision and mission without going into burnout, what kind of impact do those grassroots leaders then go on to have in their communities and in the world?
Well, it's super exciting. You know, some of the projects, I guess our flagship program that a lot of women get involved in is called Lead the Change. And it's a 12-month program. Obviously, you're involved with it, Catherine, and doing some amazing work. And what women go through is a simultaneous, let's get life sorted across the board on every level, as far as it's ever possible to achieve that, of course. And then at the same time, we start talking about this. What is the difference you want to make in the world? What is the vision? How do you want to have that impact? And we invite women to take on some kind of project, some social justice project or a community-based project. Sometimes it's something through their work, but very often it's something outside of that realm where they get to practice these new, what we call soft power leadership skills. And the sorts of things that women have mobilized and created and activated during those, you know, these years with us since we launched 6 years ago are extraordinary. You know, I'm thinking of Lisanne McLaughlin, who was a coach in Ireland. She's an actress, actually, in a number of soap operas and things in Ireland. She's quite famous over there. And she had an idea to make her town single-use plastic free. And the town had a lot of festivals during the summer and so on back in the days. Remember festivals, Kat?
Oh,
I'll tell you, total tangent. I got a message from a mate of mine in New Zealand the other day who said, I've just got back from a yoga festival and it was fantastic, but I have to say it was a little bit too personal development, a few too many hugs with random strangers. I'm like, I'm sorry. No compassion from me, buddy. No. You take that right back, you go back to that festival and you hug every stranger from me and you appreciate it. Anyway, back in the day festival. So Lisanne McLaughlin decided that was her mission. That's what she was going to do. And so she went around to all of the businesses in the area. And you know, the first food festival that they had in her town that summer, there was not a single plastic bottle, not a single plastic straw. They got rid of the whole lot by mobilizing that. And then that was watched by a number of other towns and a number of other councils who went, oh, we should do something like this too. And that's kind of started a bit of a movement inside of One of Many for the environment group, who are now doing all sorts of little projects, all in different localities around the world. I'm also thinking of Sarah Simons, who is she works in construction. She's a designer, I think environmental designer, I think is the correct word for what she does, environmental architect, that kind of thing. So she's got her day job that she does over there, and that was. When she first started the program, she was pretty, I wouldn't say unfulfilled, but wondering, is this it? Like it was a very one-dimensional life that she was living through her work. Through the program, there was a big green space. She talks about green deserts, that a lot of villages and towns have these big lawns, which are not places of biodiversity, the village green and stuff with just this big green area. So they're effectively for wildlife deserts. They don't add, they're not good for biodiversity. So she said, well, in our village, I want to transform that into a haven of biodiversity inside the village. And again, this got noticed by the wider council, and it is now activating across her whole area, which is now feeding into her expertise in her workplace. She's now getting recognized and being that voice of taking that piece of knowledge, which they never would have known about, but into her workspaces. We've had women supporting refugee communities. We've had, women fundraising for an organisation that I support, the Hunger Project, which our mission is to end hunger. So here we have, hundreds and thousands of women in our communities who are all way too busy. I want to be really clear about this. Everybody is way too busy to be doing all of this. But when we step out of old paradigm, superwoman, more have to do it all myself, burnout, and step into new paradigm type thinking of how do I collaborate? How do I do this with and through others? What does it take to hold a space for something and invite others into that space to support and contribute? When we make that shift, we're seeing women activating on real projects that are making a real difference in a local way, and in some cases, national ways as well. It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary, humbling to witness.
Oh, incredible. And that's the power, isn't it, of that holding that space to bring people together collaboratively. And right now, that's so important. How do people then come out of this old paradigm that you're referring to there and step into the new paradigm? How do they make that shift from overwhelm to impact in their communities?
I think the first thing is it's about appreciating the ocean that we're swimming in. Do you know? It's that old metaphor of a fish doesn't know it's in water until you take it out. So we have to first of all wake up to the paradigm in which we're operating to recognize how it is not serving us as women. We live and this operates on many levels. At a national level, depends which country you live in, but it's worth doing. There's some interesting research done by a guy called Hofstadter in 2001, and he looked at the relative masculinity and femininity of different nations around the world. Those that were more masculine would celebrate values such as material success, individualism, competition, those sorts of elements. Whereas cultures that were more feminine would celebrate community collaboration, family, humility, and so forth. So interestingly, in his research, he showed that more feminine communities were better for men and women. It's not just that the masculine communities are better for men and the feminine communities better for women. Feminine communities work better for everybody when you look at them. And so interestingly, the UK where we live, Australia where I'm from, are very masculine countries. We very much celebrate individuals. We very much celebrate, wealth and achievement, and kind of we make equivalence between that and worth, that someone is more valuable if they're more worthy, if they're wealthier, for instance. Competition and drive like that, which leads to situational ethics sometimes and things like that. So we first of all live in national cultures, many of us, that celebrate those masculine values. Then we're brought up in families that may also push us towards being high achievers. And if I want something done right, I've got to do it myself. I'm not worthy of love unless I'm getting straight A's, that sort of stuff. And then in addition to that, we then go and enter workplaces which the overwhelming majority of workplaces are, of course, still driven by those same very masculine values: individualism, competition, being the number one, the best, et cetera, et cetera. And even where there is collaboration in those workspaces, the unconscious culture is one of, you will stay and you will push through and you will, that it's rare where you get a compassionate kind of workplace culture. So you add all of these together, and for women and men alike, right? But let's talk about the impact that has on women. We are turned into, if we get three choices, basically. One, we either say, okay, I agree, I'm up for it, and we turn into Superwoman. And Superwoman is the name of the archetype that I think is the archetype of our times, which is high achieving, great at my career. I will do all of the things for all of the people and I'll do it the best. And I know I need to go to the spa because that's what I do for self-care. So I'll get to the fucking spa and I'll get and then I'll go out on my speed dating, and then I'll get, or if I've got home, I'll get down and dinner's on the table, it's a military operation and bed will be done on time. And then we're all into bed and then we collapse on the couch in a heap of Netflix and red wine, So Superwoman, we can choose to go for it, and a lot of women choose that. Some women may have had a mother like that or have a sister like that, and they go, nah, if that's what being a success looks like, I'm not interested. So they go into anti-Superwoman, they check out and they think, well, if that's the only way to make an impact, I'm not gonna go there. So we get this anti-Superwoman or kind of Superwoman choice. And then some of us end up in this funny conflicted place in the middle where we want to make a bigger impact because we care, we deeply care. At a soul level, we know Superwoman isn't the solution, but most of us don't have another frame of reference. And so we end up in this conflicted state of one foot on the accelerator, one foot on the brake, saying, go for it, grow my business, make an impact in the world, do something, stop, I can't, I'm burning out, I need to self-care, I need to prioritize me, I can't, go, stop. And we end up in a very conflicted place where we just then end up feeling like a failure across everything. Here at One of Many, what we talk about is when you see that the paradigm you're in calls forth these disempowering archetypes. Back in the 80s, everyone said, go be a Superwoman. But now I think we can see that doesn't serve us. She is what has us burn out because she runs on adrenaline. I think all of us, especially the mothers, though not exclusively the mothers, in the last 48 hours have felt Superwoman, right? Right, got to get organized, homeschooling, that drive to want to get everything controlled and sorted out. So that's okay for like 15 minutes, maybe even 15 hours or a super busy day. But most of us end up there for 15 months or sometimes 15 years. And because she runs on adrenaline, that's why we burn out. It's why we're 60% more likely to suffer job stress and burnout than men are, I believe. That's my hypothesis anyway, It's not, I don't have the proof on that, but that's my hypothesis.
And that adrenal fatigue, and it affects us mentally, physically, in every possible way, doesn't it? And obviously your background is in the medical side. You were a doctor, right? So
absolutely.
The impact that this has for women, psychologically, mentally, physically, every possibility.
That's it. There's only so long you can operate by that, where before you get tired, and we go through these phases of going, tired but wired. So you're tired, you're in that Superwoman state, but your adrenaline's coursing so much that you can't switch off, you can't get to sleep. Then we start seeing the telltale signs of burnout of those, like every 3 months having a cold but crashing out for a couple of days. And then eventually we get to that place of brain fog and fatigue and all of those sorts of things. And we are very susceptible to that, So what we need to do is go, well, if we want to have more impact, but we don't want to have more of the perceived cost of that impact, which we get if we just do it more from Superwoman, we need a completely new way of operating, right? And that's what we talk about at One of Many. Your original question was, how do we make that shift? The first shift we have to make is almost to reinstall a new operating system inside our biology, which is coming from a place of what we call soft power. And we talk about 5 women's power types. And if we can activate each of them in the way that we operate in the world, rather than coming from superwoman or victim, bitch or martyr, who are her cousins that are usually hot on her tails, we come from, instead of that, we come from our queen energy, right? That she that can see the vision for the realm, that can bring a community together to be able to work towards a common vision. We operate from our mother energy of unconditional love, of compassion, of nourishment, of safety, providing safety for people. If we work from our lover energy, our lover that centers in our own self-care and takes care of this one body that we've been given, nourishes this body, enjoys life, has pleasure, replenishes. If we come from our sorceress energy, which is that part of us that connects to our purpose in the world and is connected to source, God's, higher self, whatever it is we call that, that can work with intuition and with the unseen forces that come to our aid. I mean, good God, through a global pandemic, the most reliable staff member on my team at the moment is Source. Do you know? I really think about it that way, that we have such a powerful mission in the world. We're just a team of humans, but we can count on that support. We can count on that unconscious support. There have been so many miracles for us over the last 12 months. It's been insane. So when we tune into that sorceress energy, we can all activate that. And of course, the warrioress energy, because we all need a little bit of that, that Amazonian kind of Wonder Woman, energy to get shit done, to fight the fights that need fighting, but then at the end of it, to shake it off, to play, to have some fun, knowing that we're not in that superwoman all the time, but to be in that expanded awareness kind of state, more like a ninja, a samurai, rather than the focus kind of how do I find my way through this maze. So we operate with those power types, and we help women to embody them, to get them as the place they come from as their default. And making that one shift then gives them access to all the resources to grow their impact and do everything else that they want to do in the world.
And just describing those soft power types, I mean, they have been a very pivotal part of my journey over the last 18 months, because my highest power type, I'll just share this for those listening today, my highest soft power type is sorceress, and one of my lowest when I first started was queen. So I was very good at linking into my intuition. Actually, mother was my second highest. So I was always very good at giving to others, but not to myself. So my automatic go-to kind of strength and leadership came into bringing people together, intuitively kind of just knowing and feeling what felt right. And that's how I guide everything I do in my business. But the challenge for me was I'm a massive overgiver. So I undercharged in my business. And this very much links into what we talk about in our community around our relationship with money, because it's all interlinked. Everything is interlinked. So I know that for many of you that are listening to this, you may be feeling, and there's a few comments coming in live while we're recording this around, this is really interesting. I've been running on Superwoman for 6 years, and rather than stopping myself, the world has stopped me and kind of throwing me in different directions. And there's another comment that's just come in from Adrienne here. Thank you for sharing, ladies. Again, saying that, sort of coming out of burnout where my body is just completely failed, it's stopped, it's stolen my voice, and ignoring the signs of that build up. And actually, that's a really good question for us to think about. What are the signs physically and maybe emotionally that we need to be aware of that we might be heading towards burnout? And are there any tools or things that you could share, Joanna, around what could we do if we're feeling like that right now?
Absolutely. So some of the early warning signs are that sense that you're just a bit off your game, right? It's mental, a bit of brain fatigue. It's executive functioning is a limited resource. Your ability, I always break it down by saying there's only so many decisions you can make in any 24-hour period of time before you have to stop. So at particularly stressful times, especially read global pandemic, the last 10 months, where we've had to make 18 decisions just about how to go to the supermarket, which in the past, it would have just been a, do I need to go or don't I? Everything else was automatic, do you know? These sorts of things, that is why many of us are at burnout now, especially facing this next wave. And I'm very present to our NHS workers and so on who are on their knees, is that, you know, they're depleted in that. So it can start with just that being off your game, that feeling a little rough and ready, brain fog, not being as good at your decisions. Then, you know, if it progresses past that, it can go into physical symptoms, like we said, of catching colds that really floor you, or just waking up with a hangover, even though you didn't drink anything the night before, like just those sorts of early warning signs. Emotionality, you know, being easily triggered into emotions can be another way that it presents itself. So, you know, someone says something to you and you just end up weeping, and it's an overreaction, but you feel powerless to do anything about it. The other side of the emotionality is numbness can set in. You can sometimes feel like you are. And I know that for me, this is one of my signs, like, whoa, okay, I'm pretty far down the track. If I feel like I'm in my family, but I'm not there, like they seem to be having some lovely family connections with each other, and I'm this weird observer on the outside that's not being impacted by the joy or not being impacted by the cuteness, then I'm like, oh wow, I'm full of emotion. Because even though it's not spilling out, what I'm doing is keeping a lid on it, because there's so much in there. It might be frustration, it might be fear, it might be grief, it might be shame. Doesn't matter what the emotion is, but we put a lid on it. And like Annie Stoker, my content collaborator and our head of coaching, talks about it being like a beach ball. If you try and keep a beach ball underwater, it takes a lot of energy. It keeps trying to pop up. And so if you feel that sense of numbness, that you are distanced from life or you don't feel feelings, it's likely that you've got a lid on how much feeling is inside. And all of these are sort of early warning signs that if you don't do something about dealing with, A, all of the emotion that's inside, B, the fact that you are still going fast and still trying to perform, then you're likely going to end up at the later signs, which is, and this is what we hear for people who get to ME and chronic fatigue, where they just wake up one day and they can't get out of bed anymore and they just cannot go to work. Or it might present itself as another health crisis, like a big endometriosis flare up, or their neck goes out and they end up on really bad painkillers, you know, those sort of, or, you know, I mean, I know for many women in our community, they might have a heart attack, or they might get a cancer diagnosis. Like they're the late stages, you know? So I think it serves us, if you know you've been in that state for a while, or if any of this rings true, when is the time to make some changes? It's right now, right? Absolutely right now.
And are there any I know that one of the tools that one of many provide to their community is this kind of like this little emergency toolkit. What are the things that you can kind of pull out? And I always, when I think about my emergency toolkit, I actually have a comfort box that I've created for myself. And in this little shoebox, I have like a blanket, I have a candle, I've got my favorite book in there, I've got photographs, and it's kind of my go-to real emergency kit. Like I was feeling really emotionally flooded and overwhelmed, I'll go to that box, I'll take myself off, and I'll tell my family what I'm doing. You know, don't come and interrupt me for the next 45 minutes or however long I need. And I just saturate myself in things that just make me feel loved. And I know that at one of many, you talk about, and there's a number of different tools that you have in your programs, but is there maybe one that you could share today, Joanna, with if someone's feeling like that right now? What's the one little thing they could do from that little emergency toolkit that could help them to reduce some of that sort of overwhelm and burnout for themselves?
Yeah, Beautiful. Well, one of the most well-used tools that we have is our Overwhelm First Aid Kit. And the Overwhelm First Aid Kit is when we get to that point where we're either overwhelmed with emotion or overwhelmed with the amount on our to-do list. How do we approach that? And I'm really happy for the ladies to have that. I'm sure that we can share a link for that as well, Catherine, for them.
Sure.
And it's 10 steps. So in the time, I know that we don't have loads of time, so I won't go through all 10, but let me tell you the first couple, because it's the first couple that are really critical and important. The first one is to stop. If you're feeling like it, especially if you tend towards martyr energy, right? I know my go-to disempowering archetype is martyr. The busier I get, the more I think I have to do for everybody else, and the lower down the list I go. It's like a self-perpetuating cycle. So for those of us who do that, the first thing we've got to do is stop, really interrupt the pattern. And I don't just mean stop, go make a cup of tea. I mean, stop, walk away from the computer, get away from the situation. If it's a confrontation with somebody, really remove yourself from the space of the thing, whatever is the tipping point that's getting you over there at that time. And if it's like, if you've just had a huge argument with your spouse or whatever, give yourself time away from whatever that thing is. Then the amount of time that you need to stop for will be dependent on, a lot of things. But we're talking, the best thing you can do is give yourself at least, as you say, 45 minutes, an hour. You go, I haven't got time to give myself 45 minutes or an hour. If you took 45 minutes or an hour to stop and then emergency replenishment, as you've so beautifully just described, if you did need to come back in the afternoon and get things done, or you did need to come back even after dinner that night and get things done, you will be able to do it far better than if you try and push through on the top of a weight of stuff. So stop and then and shift gears is the second step. Then is to do some emergency replenishment. So it might be make tea. I like to get outside in nature. For me, I power out in Warrioress into the fields outside, rain, hail, or shine, and I stride out that. It's usually frustration tips me over the edge. Stride out that frustration. By the time I get around to this grove of trees over the way, I can step into sorceress energy. I feel grounded. I connect to source, and I just bring that in. And usually if I've had to activate my Overwhelm First Aid Kit on any day, that night I will do a big dance it out session. We do a dynamic meditation that Annie Stoker leads in our community. She does that once a month. It's a practice that I use weekly, sometimes twice weekly myself. And it's a way of getting emotions out of the body and moving through. So they make a real difference. But the key thing is stop. The second thing is replenish. You've got to put something in the tank. And then if you've got that bit, it doesn't have to be a full tank. You can't go from 6 years of Superwoman and Burnout to a full tank in 45 minutes. That's not possible. But you can get enough juice in the tank to be able to see the wood for the trees that day. And that's the key distinction. Then you grab a pen and paper and you dump out on that list every decision that is bugging you, every issue that you're frustrated by, every action you've got to take, dump it all out. And then we teach you how to prioritize what has to be done today, what can be left for a few days, and what's actually pretty low priority. Then we say, go replenish again, because you just used up the tiny little bit of juice that you put in the tank. Go replenish again, and then do just those things that need to be done today, and the rest gets left. Then you've got to activate some longer term strategies to keep you out of Superwoman and into replenishment and the soft power types for the future. But that's the first step.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. There's so many little pearls of wisdom in there. And journaling for me, I know we've talked about the power of journaling on the podcast previously. And we've had, in fact, a lady who I was introduced to from the One of Many community. And, journaling for me was one of those things that didn't feel natural, because I used to write diaries as a child, and I remember my diaries being found and read, and I was really embarrassed, and there was lots of shame in there. And so the thought of actually journaling was like, oh goodness, I can't possibly do that. But actually pushing, not pushing through it, so to speak, but actually understanding what resources you have available to you already inside, and the power of just listening to that voice and being able to tune into what is your unconscious telling you that can actually help you through that current challenge, and then obviously bringing the power of people around you to support you with that. So it's just been an absolutely incredible journey. And I know, Joanna, that you have also got an awesome challenge, a free challenge coming up in your community. Is it later this week that it starts, or is it?
We can get registered from Friday. Yeah, it's called Activate 2021. We're really present to the fact that we're in this odd situation at the moment, aren't we? Where we've just had a new year and everyone's got that energy of wanting fresh start, new leaf, all of that kind of stuff. But if we're actually truthful with ourselves, we all can just tell that the only thing that changed was the date, right? Like there was, and if we were even slightly under any other illusions, the government changed everything a couple of days ago here in the UK for us just to prove that was the case. So we're in this kind of weird and ambivalent state at the beginning of 2021. There's all these fabulous Facebook memes of, 2021, you've got a pretty easy remit. All you got to do is be better than 2020. You can do it, but there's this, we're in this funny state of, okay, yeah, it's that time where we want to be planning for the year. It's that time where we want to be starting on something new. We feel we've got some energy for that, maybe. Some of us do. Some of us are still on our knees from last year and really don't, and probably won't by the end of the week after 3 days of homeschooling at any rate. But we're in this weird state. So we're talking in the Activate week, and we're calling it a challenge, but don't worry, it's not going to be challenging. It's going to be really supporting you to do the work that you need to do to let go of 2020, the hurt, the anger, the frustration, the fear, all of that, to embrace what we learned about ourselves and how we can, and the great lessons and the gratitude from last year, and to be able to then turn that into and look forward to a horizon even beyond 2021, which is how far we need to look for our navigation at the moment, because it's impossible to plan 3 months out right now, but it is possible to navigate from source energy much further out. So we're talking about how do we do that? And we're culminating. So the actual challenge starts on Monday, and I'll be live in a Facebook group Monday through Friday, then culminating in a visioning and planning workshop next Saturday, which is a 2-hour workshop that will be leading together. So it'll take us through everything we need to be able to do to start this year right, without over expectations of ourselves, but equally without checking out, because it's all too hard to think about the future. Do you know?
Yeah.
We can't register for it yet. Registrations will start on Friday. It's a very short window. From Friday to Monday, you've got to register. So, Catherine, if we send you the link, maybe you can share it in your communities and the ladies can get registered. Or you can join the one of many communities, and we'll be sending the links out as well that way, whichever works for people.
Yeah, we've actually got the link on an email, I think, just this afternoon. So we can send that out to any of our newsletter subscribers, anyone in our communities. We'll send that out as soon as possible to you. So you have that available for the end of this week. I myself will be participating, even though I'm in all of your programs, and absolutely, it's had a huge impact for me. So I just wanted to finish today's interview, Joanna, by saying a massive thank you for the work that you have created in this world, because I know, you have just had an impact on me, but on my friends, my families, and all the other ladies that you have helped to inspire and lead. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine. And it's a real honor. I see the work that you're doing in the world and how much you're impacting your community and helping them to step into their power around their money and their finances. And it is just such a beautiful, beautiful opportunity, I think, for all of us in this space to work with each other, hold each other, buoy each other up, because it's the only way we can do it, right? It's the only way we can do it. So I thank you for your work, and thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm getting quite emotional, actually.
Yeah.
about it. This is the impact that your work has on me, Joanna. But thank you so much for your time today. It's been super interesting. And for anyone who's listening on the replay, if you're listening to this later on the podcast and you've missed the Activate challenge, then we will pop some additional resources that we've talked about in today's episode into the show notes and into the blog resources as well. And obviously you're in our community. I'm sure you'll be seeing more of Joanna as well, as we invite her to integrate her incredible work into our community too. So thank you for listening today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll catch you all again soon. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you, darling. Bye-bye.
Bye.